It's interesting when I think about my journey and I think about how I was able to keep moving in such huge areas of growth without letting circumstances hold me back. And I'm not talking just like I felt sad one day, but I really think that a lot of people, they let how they feel dictate how they move. And there's a human element to ourselves. You're going to be human some days. You're going to wake up and some days you're like, I don't want to show up today. I'm sad today. I'm angry today. I'm feeling emotion today. But if you can learn to alchemize that emotion, and what I mean by that is when you think of alchemy, it's that process of turning something ordinary into something extraordinary. Most people think of alchemy and it's like you turn a rock into gold or you turn something, average into something incredible. I've always found a way to turn what I'm experiencing in that moment into something incredible. I think some of my greatest writing has come from times of sadness or something external has happened in my world and I've used that to fuel the next thing, or I've used it to create something. When I'm fired up, when I'm angry, when I'm passionate about something, I don't then go project that onto my audience. You'll never, ever, ever read like an angry post from me, but you might read a post from me that is like fueled by something. You're like, this is coming from somewhere. And it's not a reaction, but it's just like there's energy here. And so what I don't do is I don't let energy build up inside of me because I think that's when people just explode, right? Where they're angry and their things aren't working and then they compound that and it builds and it builds and it builds. But I've always been able to transfer energy. So I either transfer it, I might go for a run or I might go for a walk, or I'm always doing something that's like it's moving the energy with me. I don't let it stagnate. I think a lot of people let emotions stagnate, and that's when there's issues. That's when people they get these blocks and these limits that they can't move beyond. You know, I hate speaking about this and I have to get better at it, but what year are we in? 4 years ago, my uncle was murdered and it was horrible. Like it was, you feel like you're in a movie. I've never listened to true crime podcasts or anything. I've never had any interest, but it still is when I say it out loud, which is why I have to get better at saying it out loud, it feels like that would never happen to you. But I remember getting that call. I was speaking to my mom about this the other day. I remember getting that call and just hearing that news and being like, this is not real, like this is not happening. And it wasn't even that instant. It's everything that came after, and when I heard that news, I was in the biggest growth period of my business. Like I was moving. And I remember so distinctly being like, so many thoughts are going through your mind, but from a business lens, from a how I see the world lens, I'm like, life is so short. And I remember channeling a lot of that sadness and a lot of that anger into my work. And whether that's right or wrong, I was going to channel that because what I wasn't going to do was just sit on the sidelines. And I would have been very validated to do that. It would have been very normal to just take a year off and to pause everything. But I'm like, one, I was so grateful because I had this freedom. I didn't have to tell my boss, hey, I need 2 weeks off. I was able to just process my feelings and my emotions and I had this freedom that was extraordinary. And I remember being so grateful for that. And I remember thinking like, I want the world to have this, you know, I want everyone to feel like who they are matters and what lives within them matters. And it became, I feel like my work only amplified from that news. And I think probably the hardest part was around 2 years later. This time I'm making like, $100,000 a month in my business and things are so good. And I remember there was the court trial coming up. And at this stage, because beforehand it's COVID, I was basically trapped in Australia. I couldn't go home to New Zealand, but I was like, I have to go. And I didn't want to go. No part of me wanted to go. But I was like, I have to be there for my mom. And it was so hard. I would never wish that on anyone, a court trial to sit through and hear details and literally be meters away from someone who'd done horrific things. That was probably the hardest time ever. And I just remember like, it's so crazy because when you're experiencing something so wild in your business, like at that time, I was running a mastermind, I had all these programs, like literally my clients are doing like the craziest things, and I'm going to this court trial and experiencing so much sadness and so much, there's anger, there's, hearing new information that triggers so much for you. But it's wild when I think about how I moved through that. I just channeled everything into my work. And I let myself grieve and I let myself have all of the emotions and all of that experience. But I just think there's something incredible that when life no longer dictates, the direction that you move, it's pretty extraordinary because there's a level of freedom where it's like, I will experience circumstances, and every single one of you have gone, like, you've all gone through really hard things. I know that. You've gone through hard times. You've lost people that you love. You've gone through a breakup, or you've gone through something that's like, this is so hard, and you feel like sadness and hard times. But when you no longer let that bend the direction of your life, you just become unstoppable. And this is not about bypassing emotion. I'm definitely not going to say, like, don't bypass the emotion. But I think as well, the way I see emotions, they're like elements. So anger for me is fire. When I'm angry, I'm just like fired up. There's like fire in my body. When I'm sad, it's like water. And I let myself like cry and just like feel like the sadness, and there's water coming through. Anxiety is like air, right? Something I love Ayurveda, so I love kind of linking how I'm feeling to like I won't go into that now, that's a whole nother subject, but it's like the air. When I'm really anxious, it's like, okay, I need to ground back down a little bit. Dreaming, like that's an element, it's like that air emotion. When you're happy, it's kind of like the earth, you're grounded, you're stable, all of those things. But it's all just a feeling, it's all just an experience. And I think where people get really caught up in emotions is they think that that's the truth of who they are. It's like, I'm sad. And then they're like, I'm sad. And that becomes the truth of who they are. And then they move through their life in a victimhood of like, I'm sad. All these things happen to me. Instead of like, I'm just feeling really sad right now. Where can I transfer that energy? If you're an artist, like go create something, go write something, go channel your work into something. If you're an athlete, you go move with that, you go transfer that energy, you go, it's like energy has to go somewhere. And so when you feel the buildup of an experience or an emotion, it's just not attaching meaning to that, or like, deciding that you are now that emotion. You're not. Another thing people do is they're like, I'm either this or this. People are either happy or sad. They're either abundant or they're in lack, or they're excited or they're bored, and they kind of seesaw between different emotions. And then what happens is they then respond to those emotions. So when they're happy, then they can go build their business. Or when they're excited, then they can go build their business. But when they're not happy, they can't, because they've attached meaning of who they are in that moment. And that's now preventing them from moving forward and surging forward, right? Whereas like, I don't react to emotion. I don't let emotion dictate how I move or how I show up. It's like, I'm just experiencing this now. How do I want to go like channel this? Like, where do I want to go put this energy into? And every emotion's different for me. This is what I mean about alchemizing emotions. You don't react to the emotion as if it's the only path available. It's not. It's like, how do you take that emotion and how do you then channel that into something incredible? How do you take an ordinary emotion, something that you're experiencing, and how do you then go and like build everything, right? When who you are is undefined by a circumstantial feeling, who you become will be undefined by circumstances. It's like, sometimes I think about just like an art board. It's like, we've got to have depth in our life. And I'm just I just don't believe that everything has to be happy all the time or sad all the time. Or do you know what I mean? It's like, there's a whole spectrum of in between. And so this process of alchemization, it's like the ordinary to extraordinary. There's so many colors in between. It's like the duality of life is so incredible. It's like, how do you know one without the other? And this is what I think about as well. It's like when I'm experiencing a really intense emotion, I'm like, wow, like I now have the contrast of the other thread. I now have the contrast of like, I'm so sad, like, and now I get to experience real happiness. And it's not that you need that to then experience the other, but I just think it's like it's part of our work, it's part of our life. But what you don't want to do is you do not want to let, and do what most people do, which is let external circumstances dictate how you move from inside. And I think about my business. My entire business has been built from stories, from knowings, from learnings, from wisdom, from intelligence. You don't get that by just sitting on the sidelines waiting for life to happen to you. You get that by going outside and living your life and experiencing your life and traveling the world and moving beyond limits. You get that by dreaming beyond measure and failing sometimes, but getting back up and moving again and again and again, day by day, moment by moment, edge by edge. It's like as an entrepreneur, as a creator, as an artist, as someone who deep down there's a knowing in your body that like you were made for more. It's like you actually have to have things to say, to talk about. If you're an artist, you need art to create. Where do you get that from? You get that from your life. You get that from what you experience, but you cannot do that if you're then a victim to your emotions or an experience. So practice letting life fuel you. If you're bored, like be bored and see what lies in that space. If you're angry, be angry. Like don't wrong it. Don't attach meaning to now you're an angry person. Just let yourself be angry for a moment. Run, move, write, create something from that. When I'm angry, I write a lot or I move my body a lot. It's like channel that into something, move that energy into something. If you're happy, be so happy. Create from pure happiness, design, like do whatever you want, dance, like let that energy move through your body and, anchor that in of like, oh, this feels so good. But it's just, I think when we get attached to it, we then like want to hold on to it and then it gets all discombobulated. Do you know what I mean? It's like it gets all like entangled with things. But you can create so much when you just let yourself be everything that you are and stop attaching meaning or conditions to how you're going to move. So many people, they have ideas, but they're like, when I feel this emotion, then I'll move. And all of these dreams, they're it's like someone's attached all of these conditions of like, you can come out into the world when, or you can do this thing when. I think the reason why I've had so much success in my business and so much success in my life is I just always moved. And I never let one thing hold me back. And there's freedom to that. It's like the world will always present conditions, but you get to respond. It's like there's a personal element to this where it's like you get to decide how you move beyond conditions. It's like most people will see that it's raining outside and be like, I can't go outside, it's raining. And then other people will go outside and they're going to dance in the rain and they, something incredible happens, they get an idea or they're alive. It's like there's aliveness there. That's the core of our work. We want to be alive. We want to feel alive in our work. People want to buy into businesses that are alive. They don't want to sit there. The stagnation thing is just so boring. You don't want your work to be boring. You want them to feel like there's emotion in there. It's like, I feel this product, like this story, I'm connected to it. There's a million different products out there. There's a million pieces of art out there, but what's going to make you different and what's going to make your business different is the connection. It's how much you live. It's the story that you translate through your office, through your services, through your brand. Like it's that story piece. But you don't get that by freezing every emotion or by creating conditions on your emotions. You get that by living your life and going all in on this vision that only you can see. And I think when you can move with this freedom, everything changes.